those of you joining in, I'm David Gable. I'm the head of sales for Kixie, but more importantly, I have with me the Copier Warrior himself, Dale Dupree, for the first time joining us on the Kixie webinar podcast. And I had an interesting question I want to pose to you, because I think most people I know that are in sales, especially on my sales teams, they didn't wake up one day and decide they want to be a salesperson. It wasn't like when they grew up, they were looking at like some historic salesperson, like, I want to be that guy. They kind of fell into it. But I don't think that's the case with you, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to hear a little bit about that, because I think you might be one of the few salespeople I've ever met who consciously knew from a pretty early age you actually wanted to get into sales.
It's a good question. You know, I don't think, I tend to agree with you. I don't think anybody has a specific profession when they're a kid, like astronaut maybe, or like Superman, or you know, I remember kids answering, even in like, I was homeschooled, but I went through co-ops, you know, where you had like 5-10 kids in a class kind of thing, and I remember kids answering that question with like, I want to be the mailman. I love the mailman. He's awesome. He brings me my mail. And, you know, and I you know, like that was probably the closest thing I ever heard to a profession. But for the most part, I heard kids dream. You know, I heard kids dreaming about the thing that they wanted to be. But I always had two routes I wanted to take. I wanted to be a star, right? That was like really what I wanted to be. I had the ability to play sports. I was good at sports. Yeah. And I had this inherent nature around like, just show me something that takes work to get an outcome through. And I was down. But my second thing was I wanted to be like my dad. That was really, you know, in the back of my head, that was the one thing I think that really propelled me into sales, because my father owned a business and he was the greatest salesperson to ever walk the earth. So I'd say, you know, I want to be like my dad. And people would go, oh, you want to sell copiers? And I would say, well, I want to be like him. You know, like, sure, he sells copiers, but I've seen my dad do some pretty amazing things. And I've met his friends and how they respect him and what they think of him. And I think those are the things that bled over. You know, I don't think as kids we really take into account, or even as adults, I should say, we don't really take into account, like when you're sitting in front of like a 10-year-old kid with his dad, what your words could potentially do to that kid. And I'll never forget all the times that I heard people say things like, you're lucky to have the dad you have. Your dad's incredible. Your dad did this thing for me once. Your dad helped me with this thing over here. Your dad's one of my favorite people. Your dad's hilarious. And most of the people that said things like that were my dad's customers. So it just always drove me back to like being a salesperson. So there you have it.
Well, and it seems like it taught you something pretty deep, which is that selling is more than just getting product A and selling it to customer B. Right. It seems like from what you just said briefly, it was more about the outcome. So like, talk to me about that. What was it about what your dad did? Because it clearly wasn't just the fact that he sold this brand of copiers. There was something else deeper about that really left an imprint on you, clearly from a young age, to the point that you're now, I think, if your dad's still around, he must be super proud. And if not, wherever he is, he's looking down. He's like, because you really probably accomplished exactly the kind of transformation he did at a young age to become the kind of person he is. And now we're like sharing that with other people. So it left a big imprint on you.
My dad's got a crazy story. My dad was in high school, middle school and high school, he played football and he was sick. He was the kid that if you were playing sports that you wanted on your team. And he was also the kid that in high school that everybody was scouting. Clemson, Auburn, LSU, UCLA, Florida State, Florida, UT. I mean, bro, the list goes like, it's a big list. And he was headed to the NFL, but he actually had, it's a long story, but the short version of it is that he had a surgery where they basically, it was a scam. It was like a Nigerian prince scam, right? It was like, we're going to make you run faster. And his mom paid cash, and these people skipped town, and they botched the surgery, skipped town on him.
Crap.
It's a whole story, right? And then he still got one scholarship offered to him, though. I thought that was pretty wild, right? He was like that good, you know, that like he got one. Wow. But it's funny because the school is called Carson Newman. And at the time it was called, now it's known as Carson Newman University. At the time it was called Carson Newman Bible College. So it was like getting a scholarship to like a community school probably in his mind. Totally. But you know what's crazy is four of his graduating class went on to play in the NFL. 2 of them played, 2 of them coached.
No kidding.
So it's not like it was a nobody school. So it's still like they believed in the underdog, if you will, kind of thing.
Totally.
But my dad broke his neck there. And the doctor there told him, yo, man, I don't know how you're standing right now. You know, like, this is crazy. So my dad, think about this for a second here. My dad had this like very specific track he was headed toward: NFL, stardom, money, fame, right? Everything you could ever want. And then in a matter of a couple of years, it was all taken from him. And at the same time too, it was also, he was being told in one instance, man, you're lucky to be alive. In another instance, that surgery, he had chronic ankle pain for the rest of his life. And I don't know anybody out there that has chronic pain that's listening, but you know, they say, I mean, basically they say like all day you're either medicated or you're just hurting, basically. So I never heard my dad complain. He didn't take medication, but I will say, like, to kind of round his story off, my father was chaotic. He was a freight train. He was a nutty person, but also extremely skilled, hardworking guy. He was an alcoholic. Yeah, he started his career in sales that way, like basically, you know, drinking with guys all night and having them sign paperwork at 1 a.m. I mean, I've got stories out the wazoo for you on my dad. But at 35 years old, man, my dad found Jesus. That's a real statement. My dad found Jesus, and he changed his whole life. And I was a year and about 8 months, 10 months old, just going on 2 years old when my father chose sobriety. And for the rest of my existence, my dad was sober. And so I knew a sober father who had this perspective of where he'd come from and where he was going. And ultimately, I think it was that 35 years, man, it was that mark where he woke up and said, I want to be, there's a guy deep down inside that I've silenced and kept very quiet, and I'm going to let him out. My mom used to say that for a solid like couple weeks that my father would just come home and weep, and he would in joy, but also in torment of releasing the past and dying to himself, which is a powerful thought, right? But my dad spent the next 29 years of his life running a business, basically, 25 years, 24 years of his life running his business, and then a few after that working for somebody else because he sold his company. But 24 years of his business dedicated to Christ and to creating something that most people just don't have. So imagine like a man coming in to sell you a copy machine, but he's thinking much deeper and much bigger about the perspective in which that he takes in his interactions with you. Imagine a man that can see past the surface of problems because of that. So you say to him something like, yeah, we're having paper jams, and his brain goes to like the outcome of that. His brain goes to the deeper. So he goes, yeah, but who's having, like, who's printing what? Why is it jamming? And what is the importance of the paper that's trying to come out? And, you know, I mean, like,
you nailed it.
It was a wild ride with my father for sure in those early stages, because he wanted to very deeply and intimately understand your business and not just sell you a copier. And because of that, he wanted to formulate relationships. He wanted to leave a legacy, and he wanted to create massive change and impact for people. So you could call my dad a salesperson for sure. You could call my dad a business owner. You could call my dad an entrepreneur, but I call him a legend. Yeah.
And, you know, you say, imagine somebody like that. I'm lucky enough not to have to imagine it, because I have one on the podcast right now, which is pretty cool. Right. Like, it seems like that left an indelible impression on you. I mean, I think a lot of us, sure, most people listening to this right now probably can't, maybe they didn't get an option to go to the NFL and they were on their way to stardom when they got scammed through multiple surgeries and injuries. But that dichotomy of, on the one hand, being told you are so lucky to have the things you have, and then on the other hand, being told, man, it sucks, these things that have happened to you and that have gotten in your way, that were out of your control and have impeded the direction you thought you were going in. What about your own life? Kind of, does that make you reflect on? Because it seems like, I'm going to guess you did not have just a straight, narrow, easy career path that led you right to where you are today, and you saw it coming a mile away. I'm guessing you also had setbacks and difficulties, and you had to challenge yourself to overcome those, just like your dad did.
Yeah, man. I struggled from depression for most of my life. Around the time I was like 9-10 years old is when I first remember kind of like dealing with it and battling it as just a young boy. A lot of it comes from trauma and situations that I was put in as a child, and that were, you know, you could call them unfair or whatever you want to call them, but ultimately they're part of my story. And by the time I was about 15 years old, I actually tried to commit suicide and survived. And it was really a very naive moment in my life, ultimately, because although I was highly depressed, and I would say that it was justified, if you will, Also, I had like no idea how to do something like to end my life. And so I carved my arm up like all the way to my shoulder and had no idea really like how to get away. But I knew that the pain that I was inflicting was helping me to feel like I was leaving and I was heading to safety or peace, if you will. My mother came home and actually like stopped the whole process and basically kind of saved my life, if you will, just depending on what lens you look at it through. But I had to keep that a secret for most of my life. And I don't think my parents encouraged that, just to like say that out loud. It was more like my mom was like, what have you done? Like, what is this? And I tried to play it off even. It was like, well, that's kind of hard to play off.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. That's a tough one to play off. As creative as you are, that's a tough one, man. It's a tough sell. Yeah.
Yeah. I honestly, like when she came, she interrupted the whole thing by just like literally coming home early from work kind of thing. And I felt like I threw a shirt back on. I thought it was like covered up and was good. And was like, and like I had this sudden just like awakening and realization of what was going on. It was like, well, I can't do it with her here. But she saw, like she could still see. And anyway, so there was a whole period of my life of getting over that, from 15 on. Man, for the next couple of years, actually, I played music and I pursued that route professionally.
Really?
Actually, at 17, I skipped college. I skipped all my scholarships. I had scholarships just like my dad.
No kidding.
For basketball and soccer, though. So he wouldn't let me play football. He told me it was too violent. Football's too violent. I could get too injured. Yet people watching me on the soccer pitch were always like, this kid, somebody needs to tell this kid that this isn't football. That's what they were always saying.
Yeah,
right?
100%. Yeah, why should
play football? This guy's just running into people and slide tackling, bending people 10 feet. So I had scholarships. I let them go, and I actually ended up touring the United States for 52 days in a self-produced tour that me and a couple of guys put together, and we got signed to a record label at the end of that tour. I skipped college altogether because of that. Played in a band until about 21, and man, that was a journey, bro. It was my first real taste of sales. I would walk around a show floor with nobody knowing who I was. We weren't signed. We were just a local band out of Orlando, Florida, in the middle of Des Moines, Iowa. And I had a backpack on, and I would walk up to people with a little Walkman CD player and with headphones and everything. And I would say, hey, I'm playing in a band tonight. My name's Dale. We're called Imperial. You've probably never heard of us. I got a CD, though, if you wanted to listen. They'd pop it on, listen to like, 15. You had the little like demo thing on those, right? Where you could skip track to track. And so it would just like fade out and go to the next one. I'd take the headphones off them, and I'd clean the headphones even. And I'd tell them like, hey, at the table, you can get the CD at the table for $20, or I got some right here in my backpack. I could sell them to you for 10. And
totally.
And they'd be like, let's go. And I'd pull the backpack out, and like, I'd have like a pin and a sticker, like kind of hanging on it. I'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I can sell you these $2 a piece. Like, yeah, man, let's do it. And I did my thing, and then we'd go on stage, and people had a little bit more connection with us, because I realized like out, playing music on the road like that there's only two things that people perceive prior to you playing and them actually hearing you, which is that they perceive your ego. So they see you like separated from the crowd backstage behind your merch table, like not participating. And then they perceive that you're a stranger additional to that. So, to me, like it was when I got into B2B sales about 5 years later, selling copy machines, and that's a trip and a half of a story. But I realized when I first got into B2B sales, I was like, man, like everything is sales. Like when I sold my albums, my music, my stage presence, my ability to perform, now that I'm selling copy machines and IT and software, like it's everything is sales. Like asking my mom if I can stay out until 10 o'clock is sales. Like, everything is sales, bro. And so I had a pretty good transition from that perspective, but ultimately, like there was a lot of stories in between there. There was a scared little kid deep down inside that was worried all the time, struggling, and ultimately there was a healing journey that I had to go on, and a lot of things attached to it, and the amount of rejection and the amount of failure that I received in sales was, but it's just the same. I like to look at it like this. You're saying earlier, like talking about like different perspectives or different journeys. I honestly believe we're all on the same journey, that we all experience the same stuff. We just experience it in different ways. So for me, it was like my version of what everybody goes through
You nailed
in
it.
life kind of thing. And it was just
You
a
nailed
little
it.
bit intense, but I've gotten through it. I'm 39 now. I still struggle with depression now and again, but I think for the most part, I'm winning the war at this point, and, one battle at a time kind of thing. So.
Well, when you said, thank God for that, one thing you said really, I think really resonated with me. And that is that, like, we all suffer through the same stuff. I mean, I think irrespective of whether maybe you turned it up to 11, but I think all of us, you, your dad, myself, the people listening, have some pain in our life we're trying to escape from, right? And you might be trying to escape through it through work, success, the gym, food. I mean, I don't care what it is, but like all of us are trying to find our own toolkit to kind of deal with all the stuff that life throws at us that so often is unfair and prevents us from doing the things we thought we were meant to do. And then it seems like a lot of times life is insistent on giving us the option or giving us chances to pursue the thing that maybe we were ultimately meant to do, even if we didn't know it at the time. So again, thrusting you into a situation where you got to sell your music essentially, and then prove that actually this is a skill set that you, whether it's by osmosis or conscious training, learned from your dad and from an early age, and you were really adept at. And that took you away from sports, it took you away from all the things you thought you were going to pursue. But I found the same thing in law. Like I went into law thinking that was what I was going to do. And law is also sales. If you want to hang a shingle and get clients and get customers, you're selling. You know what I mean? And if you're going to court or writing a brief, you're selling as well. And that's actually the most fun part of law. It's kind of why I pursued it as a full-time, career, I guess. But back to you, like when you look back on this, what are some lessons you think that would be helpful for other people going through the same thing, dealing with pain, struggling to deal with it, and trying to find a way forward in spite of it?
I think when it comes to the struggle portion, I think that silence is your enemy. It's everybody's enemy. And that ultimately, like as men, if there are any dudes out there listening, I can relate if you are silent about the things that you're struggling with. But I think that that's because of a stereotype that's not true, that somehow we're supposed to be this strong thing, like the Andrew Tates of the world that sit out there and talk about masculinity in a way that defies everything, including the other species of human that exists on the earth with us, and like being some kind of conqueror. And look, I think the most powerful man is the one that's not afraid to show emotion. I think that person has something that in most instances no one holds a candle to. My father was that man. My father was the man in the room that wasn't afraid to dive in deep emotionally. And he was very good at controlling his emotions, I'll say too. I only saw him ever cry a handful of times in my life, right? But the fact that I saw my dad cry, I think that most men out there with a father, if he was present, can't share that sentiment. Like, I never seen my dad do that. Like,
definitely,
and my dad, like one instance of my dad crying was like later in my life. So that struggle with depression came back to me. I was crushing my sales career, as the kids would say. And I went from really struggling and trying to figure myself out for the first couple of years to really just hitting my stride, creating my own character or moniker, if you will, called the Copier Warrior. Built my own marketing, established marketing presence via a website, a bunch of printed material, tons of props and things that I used on a daily basis to give people extraordinary experiences inside of the way that I reached out to them to try and set an appointment. And really, I never even had to ask people for appointments. I just had to show up in this unique way, and people would ask me to come in or ask me to come back or ask me to look at their equipment or ask me to look at their contracts. That's what really happened. I think the best salespeople understand the psychology of someone wanting something versus somebody being told they need it.
Yes.
Right. There's some way big difference in there. And so the more
huge difference.
The more that I leaned into that though, ultimately, like the more I created vulnerable moments for myself, like the more I did stuff that nobody would do. And so because of that, I was the subject of scrutiny. I was made fun of by people in the industry. I was kind of picked on and bullied, if you will, as an adult, which is like really weird. By other adults as well. Yeah. And I came from a background where, like, with my depression, the thing that was my outlet was my anger. And so, like, when I played in a band, I'd get in the mosh pit, and it wasn't like your traditional moshing. It was violent, swinging fists, swinging legs, kicking people in the face. I mean, very intense scene that I was a part of. And And I
I'm
use
sure
that
sports too.
as
Outlet for that.
Sports was definitely an outlet for that as well. But like I'd get thrown out of the game, whereas like in a club somewhere, if I'm jacking someone in the jaw, I could probably sneak out and be all right. No cops, you know. But in B2B, you can't sit across the table from somebody that's, you know, tormenting you and get up and give them an elbow or a flying knee, you know, like that ain't gonna happen, man. Like, so there was these things I had to start to learn for myself. I had to learn to detach. I had to learn tolerance on another level. Like I was already a tolerant person, but I had to learn more of it. I had to deeply dive into my soul. And because of those things, I awoke in a part of me that existed that darkness didn't want to be awake. And I slipped big time. I was abusing alcohol. I was basically numbing my life at times. But meanwhile, I was the #1 sales rep. I was, everything was good, man. I was making way more money than I can even tell on this podcast, because if the IRS listens, they're going to be like, yo, hold up a second. We did your taxes that year. Where is this other money? But I digress. You know,
hypothetical.
It's very hypothetical. I went from $60,000 a year to making over $500,000. And, you know, again, like people would look at that and say, man, what a cool achievement and feat. I felt 100%. Like I wasn't doing enough. I felt like that was not an achievement. I felt like I was failing in so many different areas of my life on top of it, and that things at home weren't the best. My wife now, 18 years, we've been together for 22 years, you know.
Congratulations,
she stuck me through all this. I appreciate that.
That's a keeper, man. That's amazing.
But yeah, for sure. But really it came back to ultimately this idea of having a man like my father in my life as a protector, a guide, a mentor, that really, like, it changed my existence, because I struggled again with suicidal ideation, and I went all the way to the end the second time around. Like the first time was I would look at it as very naive and childish. The second time I planned things, I put money in places, I wrote suicide note that I actually found in my desk several years later.
Wow.
That and this is after the success. I forgot about. Yeah.
This is after the monetary success. So talk about
an intense time, man.
How crazy is it? Because I think so many of us, myself included, listen to podcasts like this, and we hear people who've made major success for themselves. I mean, this isn't like you inherit the money. I mean, you worked your ass off. You earned this money. And yet that wasn't enough. Like what was still happening to inside of you that made you feel like, look, this success actually isn't enough. It isn't even making me that happy, like, at all. Right.
Yeah. I feel like what happens, the best way I could describe it is that, like, money is just this compartment, right, in life. And that, so we look at it as something that's almost intangible at a certain point. You know, my dad was basically a broke entrepreneur. He lived paycheck to paycheck and ran a business. And so he had time and flexibility, but he wasn't making millions. He wasn't even making hundreds of thousands. You know, when I started making that kind of money, especially if you think of the time frame, bro, I mean, we're talking 2013, 2014, you know, like that kind of money could pay for a lot of things. So I had a very nice life, you know, from the perspective, again, of like the box that the money was in. But bro, then you got relationships, you've got the woman of your dreams that you're in love with, in a marriage that you're pursuing on a daily basis. You have hobbies, you have likes, you have dislikes, you have dreams additional to like working every day. And man, I think the biggest thing that I can tell people is that, like, everybody burns out in their own way too. And that I was burnt out, but not in like, I don't want to work anymore. I was burnt out like, man, I can't, like, look, I got all this success in my business life and sure, I got these great friends, but I'm hurting. I have these secrets that nobody knows about. I have this torment that's killing me from the inside. I have almost a secret life at the end of the day of drowning in alcohol, of disconnecting from the world, of trying to fill this void, and I can't figure out where it is. And I was beaten. I was beaten. Man. I was at my last breath, bro, for sure. And I mean, divinity saved my life the day that I tried to leave for a second time. They say that people that try to commit suicide multiple times, to say it's I think it's a 0.7, or there's some stat out there. It's pretty ridiculous, but like the rate of survival, right? At like just surviving the first time creates like it's no double jeopardy rule here. Like you're gone, man. It's over. And so I look at it as a blessing and a miracle. ultimately, at first I thought of it as just like, I'm this cursed, right? Like I can't even leave. And it was intense. There were some intense moments, like almost psychotic breakdowns, if you will, in a matter of seconds. And man, I'll tell you that, like, to me, like my whole life is a giant testimony to my faith. And I'll tell you that God saved my life ultimately that day. And he revealed himself to me in ways that I just can't express. I can't explain, that most people will never experience in their life. And I'm grateful for that. And I have never squandered those moments. Instead, I've continued to lean into the risk, to lean into the discomfort, to lean into the hard stuff, to expose things to the people in my life that I love that they never knew about, to expose things in the present day that people in my life are like, what the heck? And it was tough. It was really tough. It was a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of torment. It over the years, even, as I slowly worked through it, it came right back again and was like, no, we can do this, Dale. We can finish this off, my man. It was intense, right? But thankfully I was given so much clarity and vision through the second round of that I was able to do things like stop and tell my wife, hey, if I wake up in the middle of the night and get in the car, I'm not coming back. Don't let me leave. And like, there was definitely some...
Dude, that takes a lot of courage.
It does, for sure. There's some days.
I got to say, what's dangerous about being a salesperson, I think, and this, everyone listening might be able to glom onto this, is that we've become so good at projecting a certain vision of what ourselves is like. So putting on a facade for a sales call, like I could be dead tired in the morning, exhausted. But the minute I get on that call, boom, I'm chipper, David. I'm happy. I'm excited because I know that's what's required of me in the moment. I got to perform. I think sometimes we become so good at that it almost becomes the default of our lives. We become very able to project a sense of well-being, that everything's going great, that I'm doing great, because we know that socially that's such a fun thing. Like, people like being around other people who are happy and doing well and things are going great. When you talk to people and you ask, how you doing? It's almost like a reflexive response. Oh, I'm good. Like, without even thinking about whether you're actually good or not. And yet I would argue that actually making yourself vulnerable is probably one of the most important skills you can have for sales, because it's the very thing that's going to make you make that actual phone call to somebody rather than just sending an email, because you have to make yourself vulnerable to rejection. It's the thing that's going to make you go door to door instead of trying to call somebody. It's the thing that's going to make you put your authentic self out there and then suffer the potential rejection of who you actually are, rather than risking a rejection of like this facade you. Because then you can just say, oh yeah, they rejected facade David. That's not even me, man. They just rejected the other me. So how did you find the courage to take it a step even further than that and tell your wife something like that, and then to show up, and I'm going to say this because I've seen some of your material and the things you talk about, show up as an authentic version of yourself in sales, as opposed to putting on like a Dale Dupree Copier Warrior facade?
Yeah, it was also like the Copier Warrior was actually, I think it was the greatest thing I ever did, because it was, it was who I am. Like, the Copier Warrior stood in, locked arm with every person that I hoped to serve. And ultimately, like, service for me also was never this thing of like, let me sell you something. It was like, let me just help. Let me look at what you're currently doing and tell you I'm not a good fit. Let me give you some advice. Let me be an ear for you, and ultimately I projected a lot of my problems, like essentially like into the copier, or away from the Copier Warrior, if you will. And the Copier Warrior was the thing I was looking for. I wanted someone to say, Dale, how are you today? I'll tell you something right now, bro. Here's something I've never told on a podcast. Here we go. This question triggered it for me too. I've never thought about this, to be quite frank, like for a podcast interview, but then this is a very intimate story. But one of my biggest sales that I ever made, man, I was 2 weeks survival from my attempted suicide, and I was struggling so heavily, and I was working hard. I was trying it was so difficult, man. It was some of the most difficult times of my life. And I sat down in front of a client, and I swear to God, bro, I think it was the first time that someone genuinely asked me the question, how are you? Because they said, you come out, shake the hand, how you doing? One of those, right? But he did all that. But then we sat down and he said, hey, are you okay? Man, I just, at that point in my life too, I've made an agreement with myself that I still stick with today, that no matter what, I'm going to tell the truth, period, no matter what. Because there was a part of me that, even though it was honesty, it wasn't the truth. Right. So somebody would say, you doing all right with your depression? I'd be like, I'm doing all right. I'm still working on it, but I'm doing all right. You know, and
there's a distinction.
Ultimately,
we're smart. We can be clever. We can find our clever way to wiggle around the questions, right? Yeah,
for sure. Because in my mind, like what I'm telling you right now is the truth, but you don't hear it the way that I'm telling you. I know I'm telling you, right? So that in that moment, man, I looked that guy in the eye. I considered him a friend after this, and he stayed very present in my life for a while too. And but you know, I looked him dead in the eye and I said, no, man. And I didn't tell him the details of what had happened, but I told him, I said, I'm struggling with my depression.
Wow.
I'm in a very intense part of my story. I'm not here fully. I'm not put together very well. I'm not faking it either. That's why I'm telling you the truth, but I'm trying.
Wow.
And man, this guy, oh man, I'll never forget that moment. He walked over to me, he laid hands on me and prayed over me.
Wow.
I found a brother. And like a month later, just about, his purchasing director signed one of the largest RFPs in my life. And I know he didn't do it out of sympathy. Right. I know that he ultimately did it because we connected that day, and like every day thereafter was so much different with him as well too. And eventually I met his boys who played soccer. I didn't have kids at the time. And and he invited me to do those things, you know, ultimately because he knew when I told him all that stuff, he knew more details about me. He knew that like one of my biggest struggles was that I wanted kids and I didn't have them yet.
Yep.
And that I felt like there was a part of me missing. And you know, ultimately that goes back to some of my childhood struggles and like wanting to raise kids like that don't have those problems and like getting a second chance.
That's kind of fantastic.
But anyway, you know, there's a pretty intense, pretty heavy story just around like the authenticity that I and that was, again, remember, like I was sitting in this aura of the Copier Warrior. But that's the thing that released me, man. The thing that released me was this brand I built that was highly, highly integral, that was very transparent, that was there to serve, that was not on this earth to sell, that was on this earth to make a difference, that was on this earth to create and inflict change in all things that it possibly could, not just saving you a few bucks or helping with the process, but to ultimately connect deeper with people on levels that were unprecedented, that would create outcomes that most people just didn't even expect to have in the first place.
Totally.
And well, most people would call that like that. So most people would call that like they call it like fairy tale living, or they say that it's a little Skittles and rainbows, if you will. When you look at sales as a medium that can change people's lives. But I witnessed it change mine. I watched it change others. And I also was very, very, very present for when my father passed, and literally sat for 6 plus 7 plus 8 hours listening to the stories from people that came up to us at that funeral. That's great. That literally only ever knew my dad as his client. And they told us things that you would not even believe. They said stuff to us about our father that emboldened us, that made us proud of him, that broke us in the moments in some cases. And these were just individual transactions as the sales world would look at them, right? But my father treated every person as if it was his mission to make sure that that human felt loved, felt seen, felt heard, felt comforted, whether he sold you something or not. And those are the lessons, man. That's why I believe that sales is the greatest profession on earth.
I love it. When you construct it, it's so honest. It's so interesting, isn't it? How you found your path to honesty and exposing yourself personally through a persona that you created. It's the opposite of what you normally think, right? Like that persona, that copy warrior is actually the mechanism by which you were able to find your authentic self and present that to the people in the world that matter to you, that you're doing business with. And rather than harm the sales process, it actually helped the sales process, because now they're dealing with a real person with real issues. And so if you say you actually want to help them with theirs, they believe you, because you really do. You're not making that up just to get the sale. You actually do care, and you've got intrinsic reason for caring, because that is the paradigm that you were brought up to try and aspire to. Like, it seems like when you created that Copy Warrior, did you create that based off of your dad? Was he the model that you constructed that off of, that paradigm?
For sure. Yeah. It definitely, like, I am the shadow of a legend. Like, I live in the shadow of a legend is how I see it. I come from the same DNA. I'm cut from the same cloth, right? But like, I will never be the man he was. The things that he achieved were absolutely out of this world incredible. That I do know that ultimately my motivation for creating the Copier Warrior was this idea that I had the greatest gift that a son or a man on this earth could have, a present, loving, intentional father. And I knew that ultimately my time with him would not be forever, but when I worked with him, I never took advantage of a moment, ever. There were definitely times when I was snotty little shit, and now
of course, we're kids.
Had a better idea than him, and he humored it and led me through those things. And those are the examples that I'll never forget. Where like he never had to be right in the moment. His expectations were none. His man, this guy had unlimited power in my mind, that he could do anything. And it was ultimately because he was strengthened by something so much more than just his own flesh, his own will, his own ideas, right? He called upon a greater power in his life, and he used it to his advantage constantly. So
that's fantastic. And the paternal instinct you had that made you want kids and want to raise kids in your life, do you think that it all drives you to do what you do now? Because I see now you're essentially trying to raise up, you're not teaching us English, but you're trying to raise up salespeople, right, to a higher level and get them to be more authentic and get them to present more of themselves truthfully and get them to be more open and honest with the people that they talk to. Is that from that same core, you think?
Yeah, for sure. The whole ideation behind, when I sat down and I wrote out the mission, the vision, the value structure of the Sales Rebellion, like my original vision before I brought anybody else in to kind of share it with me to any capacity, my dad was the rock. So I created this concept of a world where, let's just say that, we had this very 80s look. And we still do. We love the nostalgia of the 80s and the 90s.
Anyone who's watching this, you got to check out the website because you'll go there. And again, it's an example of being intentionally different. You want a website that stands out? Go look at his website. The Sales Rebellion stands out. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to build that. And those mountains, what we did is we created lore for people that inside of the community to understand that the mountains actually have purpose in those grids. And that
really
on top of a mountain in there is what we call the tomb of the Copier Warrior. And it's a place where I laid myself to rest, I died to myself to go and to achieve something bigger, like the Sales Rebellion. And in the lore of the Copier Warrior and the tomb that is in the side of this mountain, essentially in our little world that we've created, the first thing that you find is not necessarily my corpse, if you will, because I died from the idea, right, of essentially burning the ships and leaving everything behind. But what you do find in that tomb is my father. You find him because he is gone. And ultimately, you find the bones of a man that blessed my entire existence on a level that created my success. I am not successful without my dad is kind of the bottom line. There was a lot of things that I did on my own for sure. And I have a healthy amount of arrogance, if you will. I love the term, healthy arrogance around what I know I'm good at and what I can do. But with all the struggles of my life, all the things that I went through, the torment, the hurt, the pain, the things that I suffered through in my early years of life that then translated to my later years, the secrets, the things that I was suffering from, and again, in silence, they're no matter what, man, my dad knew everything. He didn't just know because I told him either. He knew because he just looked me in the eyes and be like, something's wrong.
He could feel it. And
we had a connection unlike most people have in their lifetime. I still feel him today on earth and all things that I do with my boys, with my wife, with my friends, with my business. I can just feel him hovering around, blessing the day, if you will, kind of thing. So
why was it important for you to make, I'll say this, but not I don't mean to make it morbid, but your third attempt at suicide, to really direct it instead of yourself, to direct it at this Copy Warrior persona, and to then actually find your real successful attempt at accomplishing maybe what you ultimately had always wanted to do, which is shedding a former version of yourself and aspiring to something greater. And then what are you doing with that now? Talk a little about the Sales Rebellion.
Yeah, so,
you took such a deep dive. Yeah,
for sure. I love the analogy. I think it's a super well articulated question. And here earlier we said we all go through the same stuff, right?
Yep.
So let's take the silver spoon fed firstborn of a billionaire. a lot of people have said this to me, even they're like, well, that person doesn't go through the same stuff we all go through. And I honestly beg to differ.
Absolutely.
Like, they have more privilege, more access, but they are just as lost and confused and scared as anybody else. And either that insecurity stays with them for the rest of their life and they fake it until the day they die, right? Or they genuinely break free and burn the ships of the things that are comfort and take their own risks. And so like, that's how I looked at that destruction, essentially, the tomb that I laid the Copier Warrior to rest in, was this idea that, look, I built a lot of safety with this thing. I built a lot of comfort with it. I could stay in the industry. I could build multi-million-dollar businesses in this part of the industry. I could be the owner of these businesses too. Like, and I jumped into something so out of left field in my mind. Maybe some people see it as like a natural progression for sure in my circles, but like, I see it like just as like, why would I even want to do this?
100%.
But it literally came because of a message I got from somebody in my early stages that said, when I was still producing content as the Copier Warrior, I was going viral on LinkedIn, and suddenly, had 20,000 followers in the course of a couple months. And I'll never forget this message. I got a message from a young man that just said how inspired and motivated he was, not just by like my success, but by my story of being an outcast, of being different, of being somebody that everybody looked at as like, yeah, you're fun and all, but you're never going to have success, being fun. You're going to have to get down to business. You're going to have to really buckle in and, like that part of the story. But then I remember I had been very vulnerable about my mental health several days before too. And the man mentioned that in that post. It was the first time that a stranger that I would never probably ever meet told me that I had an impact on their life, albeit very small in my opinion. It was enough that something lit up in me that said, I don't care if I ever make another dime, that the feeling I have just received from what this man just expressed to me is beyond fulfilling. And ultimately it concluded the vision for me, because it's like you just said, like, are you building a business that's based around your dad? Well, hell yeah, I am. And my dad affected people that he'll never meet in his walk. And he will through me as well too. Do this, like he will literally, people will know my father without ever knowing him, period. And to be able to do that, and to be able to hopefully at 100, maybe 105, take my final breath. There's a guy up here on this mountain that is 104 years old.
Really?
So I'm like, there's not a lot of people up here either, right? So I was like, okay, cool. So this is like a secret mountain where everybody lives to be 104. Let's go.
But like, he brings the average up by 20 years just by being there.
Yeah, exactly. Please stay. Anyway, so again, like the idea of, where would you be at the end, right? Where people typically tend to go toward their status. I want to retire. I want luxury. I want this. I want access. Like, man, take all of that from me. And give me just simply the ability to be able to give people freedom, ultimate freedom. So the idea of deafening their silence by speaking it out. And really this concept of the sales rebellion goes beyond sales. It's a rebellion. We make people better. We take people, the lost, the broken, the weary, give them to us. We'll turn them into monsters, because we'll help them to see they're not lost. They're not weary. They're not broken. We will get them to the place that they need to go. I mean, the successes that we've had as an organization with people are unprecedented, but I think that the thing that we've done that really drives the mission and keeps me waking up every morning and doing this again and again and again is knowing that we are freeing people from what this world has shackled them to, especially in the business realm. You
nailed it. Well, I mean, early on in this podcast, one of the first things you said was that, a lot of people don't realize the impact one small comment can make to a little kid between like his dad and them when they're young growing up. That one comment, like someone you look up to on LinkedIn, giving you permission to be authentic about the struggles you're going through, just by the fact that they did. That's all it takes. You being authentic in that one and vulnerable in that one instance gave so many people, I'm sure, who listened, and the one person who replied, the permission to be like authentic themselves and to let out the fact that they're struggling too. And I think everyone goes through that. And that message changed the course of, probably that person's life, definitely your career trajectory going forward. I want to bring it around a little bit. One of my reps reached out to you, and this is an unusual podcast because this is a podcast with somebody we just started working together, but I've always wanted to work with you. I get the sense you wanted to work with a company that approaches partnerships like us. Why did we catch your interest? And what about my rep, Stephanie, by the way, I'll make sure to give her credit. Why did her message capture you in such a way? Because I'm sure you get hundreds of messages all day, every day, from all sorts of people wanting to partner with you, where partnership means throwing some money at you to say their product is wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. I'll go back to the beginning of that. I got an email. I actually ended up looking it up after Stephanie reminded me, but it's funny because Stephanie, the fact that Stephanie started in a very negative place with me. She called and said, hey, we had a rep reach out to you like a year ago, and he said these things about this. And I was like, well, hold on. And she kind of was progressing the conversation, right? I kept coming back to it because I think most sales reps in those moments, they're cooking something, I'm just going to say it. The people at Zoom Info are really good at this. They tell you, you talked to so-and-so a year ago, and you're like, what? And
what? Yeah.
And then they can produce no evidence. There's nothing in my email. There's nothing. And I have a great memory, right? I have a great freaking memory, right? And so the fact that she followed me into this negative place and was like, we basically reached out to you, and this is like literally what she said. She said, well, we told you that we helped people like Grant Cardone, but I also realized that that's probably not a good thing. And I started laughing and basically said, what do you want? You can tell me anything you want right now, and I'll give you some time. And so she didn't go straight for a sale. She went straight for hey, look, you got a dope community and we like what you're saying. She referenced some things that were, clearly that even I don't care. I'm not one of those people that's like, you got to be hyper personalized in your outreach. If you call me cold, at least know what you're doing. Right. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if I were to say something like, what do you know about my business? I would expect for you, if you're calling me cold, to say, well, nothing. This is a cold call, dude. And I'll respect that more than I will you saying well, you're the CEO of the Sales Rebellion.
To make up something.
Yeah. Right, bro. So to me, it's just about integrity. It's about honesty, but it's ultimately about aptitude. And I could feel that Stephanie, whether she's been around the block and done this for a while or not, she's really tapping into this idea of she's learned through experience. Yeah. She knew how to meet me where I was in that moment. And I was highly impressed with her. I really do like her, to the point that I don't do a call with someone like you because a sales rep asked me to, quite frankly, straight up. This is the first time I've ever said yes to that in 6 years. Right. So, she painted the picture really well. She articulated things on a level that was I even called her out about, she going to be listening? She's going to be laughing. I called her out. I was like, yeah, but you called me from a local number, but it's an area code for not actually for where I'm from. And because I'm a local, I already know when I see this come through, this is a spam call. It's a solicitor, right? So it's so that doesn't necessarily make me want to partner up with you, but
totally.
I like these other things you're saying. Let's talk about that. And I think even her ability to just kind of again, follow the conversation, to not have an agenda, to be willing to learn more than just trying to get me to say yes to something made it much easier for me to say, set it up. Let's see, put your money where your mouth is. Let's see these guys. Let's see what's going on here. So
totally. And it's, I think that's so important for us too. We don't even have an outbound team right now. We built this, we have a partnership team because I think that's the way forward with selling. I think the way forward right now, there's a lot of fears about AI and all the automation that's coming to take everybody's jobs away in sales and stuff like that. The human to human connection and the partnerships you build, just like the ones your dad built, just like the ones you're building now, those are the ways to establish long-term trust, long-term integrity, long-term business success. Those are the things that I think that brick and mortar, that foundation, I don't think is going to get shook up by this stuff, no matter how great the technology is. And so I always look for other people out there who are selling in that same way. And I try and partner with them because I know that's going to be a long-term success, outcome-driven partnership. That's really not just about the outcome being we get money and we share that money with you for sending clients our way. The outcome is who can we help through these products and services. So whether it's Kixie's going to help you dial 10 lines instead of one, okay, what does that really mean? Well, hopefully that means more time with your kids at the end of the day. You know what I mean? You can still make your quota and have some extra time at the end of the day to spend with your family. That's an outcome that I truly care about, as opposed to just making a couple bucks off of somebody. You know what I mean? Yeah. So going forward, what are some of the exciting things you're working on now at Sales Rebellion?
Man, we did a big pivot last year. We decided we wanted to really just turn the group that we have into a community more than just the buzzword of it, but take a lot of action, present people with the ability to come and be heavily immersed into the things that we believe and teach through an experience and a couple day experience of that. So we launched Totality, which is our national conference. At this stage, we're having round 2 this year. And then ultimately we've turned the organization into, we're more of like a boutique sales agency, if you will, at this point, like for creative, sellers or organizations that want to sell creatively, if you will, where we'll help you with your outbound in completely different way than anybody else will. And even though we do still have like advisory programs and we have group cohorts for individuals to come learn, we're doing them different. We're doing a lot more of the fulfillment side. We're taking a stand on, like this idea of like, hey, come and get coached and get an ROI. Like a lot of it's like, hey, come and burn the ships with us. Take a big risk. Be willing to lay it all on the line. Be willing to tell us like what's going on in your life. Be willing to let us hold you accountable to the relationships at home just as much as the relationships at work, and build better people, right? So we're definitely moving in a direction that makes a lot of people uncomfortable as well too, because like you just said, like this whole AI thing, everybody's moving to AI, and like what's a physical human cold caller going to do that's like any different than the way that it's been done at this point. But no one's seen how we sell, right, except for the buyers that love our stuff. And
that's it.
I think what we have right now is something extraordinary. I mean, I did a call block yesterday because I still get in the trenches and do this thing. And I did a call block for one of our clients, and I got a pretty normal amount of connections. But ultimately, like if you were to sit down and look at the conversations I had with people compared to a typical sales rep, and then the meeting I booked, which was literally somebody asking me to come in and not the other way around. I think you would agree that like what we're doing is something highly disruptive, and it can't be scaled in a way that like, turns us into a unicorn. And that's exactly what I want, to be quite frank. I don't really care about unicorns. I don't really care about all your money and all the cool stuff you did at your SaaS. I just don't care. What I care about is who are the 30,000 loyal followers that you created through your actions, right? Because when these people talk about all this crazy stuff they did, and then I go meet the people that they were leading, they don't got nice things to say about you. They don't say anything kind at all, to be quite frank. And it makes me sit back and think, man, you guys are all full of smoke, and nobody will come out and say anything because they know you got money and that you'll take the heat, because you'll just put them in court for defamation or some crap. But again, I think it's all a game, and we ain't playing games. And we've changed our model, we've changed our ideology. We're looking to take $10-20 million companies to $40-50 million companies, and $50-60 million companies to $100-110 million companies, and incremental growth that's highly effective, that changes lives. That creates legacies, that builds something different. And man, we're locked in. We're locked in on it, and we're rolling. And for the vast majority of the community outside of those singular contracts that we have, we're just building something dope. We're building the Rebel Covenant, which that's an exclusive right there for you that nobody knows about. And we've got the Totality meetup every year, and we'll have something pretty dope, in the next 6 months here that I think it'll be pretty indestructible, and we'll be around for a long time.
Dude, I'm excited. I'm excited to go to Totality. You guys sent me over the details, because I would love to be at the event. I want to do a part 2 of this interview when we go there, because this is the relationship. I am so excited to work with you. I'm excited to work with your guys' team. Like, I think, again, my mission with Kixie, I didn't wake up one day and was like passionate about telephony. Like, that's never been something that was like a big thing for me. But I am passionate about making people better. I'm a big sports guy. I'm a big workout, weightlifting, training guy. I'm a real big believer in people being much more plastic and elastic than they give themselves credit for, and being able to really change themselves for the better. And I know that that's what you're doing, and that's such a core part of your mission that I just feel really blessed to be able to partner with you and to have this opportunity to talk to you on the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, man, it's my pleasure. It's great hanging out with you.